Our next joint is a Mortice and Tenon joint, and the tools we will use to construct this joint are as follows. We have a mallet for driving the chisel, a steel rule for measuring and using as a straight edge, a steel tape for measuring, a combination gauge which is a mortise gauge and a marking gauge, a tenon saw, a set of beveled edge chisels, and just off the screen there is a mortise chisel which is a slightly thicker blade than the beveled edge ones. Here is a diagram of what we're doing, and it shows us the details. And now we go straight into setting out with our face side and our face edge mark. This indicates which side is going to line up, and it helps us for gauging off and also for squaring off. Now, as before, we're going to put our piece of timber in the centre, so we mark it off at 70mm. We now need the width of the timber, which is 44, so we come in 22mm from the centre point, which gives us the outside edge of the timber. We draw a square line across there, and we place our timber on right up to the line to keep it a nice tight joint, and mark the opposite edge. This line is now squared across, keeping the square or the stock of the square on the face edge. That is the width of our mortise saw. We can now square that across the face edge, and across the back edge. And on the back edge sometime we put an extra line which just makes it a little bit wider to allow for wedge room, but we've not marked it on this occasion. We now set our gauge up again, and we set the 2 points of the gauge to the width of the chisel right at the end, not at the base. We set the chisel for central, the gauge for central, and we press the points of the gauge in, so as we gauge down it stops when it hits the points and it doesn't run through and spoil our piece of timber. Still gauging off the face side, we do the opposite edge. We have now marked out our mortise saw ready for cutting, and so we go on to marking out the tenon. We're hatching in the centre portion just to remind us that it's the middle bit that comes out. Now we're going to mortise this out now, and we tighten it up in the vise, and using our mortise chisel, starting in the centre, we drive the chisel into the timber, keeping it vertical, and we cut a little V out of the centre of the timber. Each time we cut the V, it relieves the previous piece of timber, and it keeps the mortise saw clear as we start to work along to elongate it. Now eventually, when we've cut the V out, we only go halfway through the timber. We start to cut down vertically until we reach the outer lines. And as we reach the outer line, we very carefully cut down. Now you can see here we're just trying to remove a little bit of the waste. We turn the timber over and we repeat the method on the other side. Note how we cut a little V out, so each cut releases the piece of timber in the middle, and it saves us blocking up our mortise saw. When the mortise saw is complete, if there are debris in, we can drive them out using a thin slither of wood and our mallet. Note how we're very careful as we're coming up to the line, because it can jump past the line if you have a lot of timber in front of your chisel. And we take care not to go all the way through with the chisel to avoid breakout on the back of the mortise. And there we have a nice clean, crisp mortise saw. We're now setting out the tenon part, and for this we need a line on all four sides of the timber. So we mark on the width of the wood, and with our square we square the line all the way around, keeping the square stock on the face side and the face edge at all times to ensure that the lines meet. We've already set our gauge up, so using the same gauge setting off the face side, we now gauge our piece of timber. You can see how difficult it looks when you're doing it, holding it on the bench with your hand. It does really need to be in the vise to make it easier. A line on the gauge line to highlight where we're cutting to, and we are ready for cutting our tenon. We place the timber in the vise, and as before we cut two tracks in the top of the timber. Note we're now hatching in the timber to show which pieces are about to come off. And remember, we've got to sew on the waist side of our wood. We start the tenon sew off, remove the hand, and we cut a track down for about 6mm on either side. We angle our piece of timber over, and we can now, using the track that we have just cut, run down the lines on either side of the joint. This ensures that our tenon is nice and parallel and isn't twisted. Turn it round the other side. Move our hand away. And that leaves us with a small triangular bit of timber still left in our joint. By lifting up the piece of timber to a vertical position, we can now run down the two saw cuts and cut square up to our lines. We are now ready for removing the shoulders. We put our bench hook on in the vise so that we can hold our piece of timber in order to cut our shoulders off. And we really do need just a hint of line left on the corner when we've removed the shoulder. Draw back the saw to make a little nick, and then with the saw in the nick we sew along, removing our thumb at the time away from the saw blade. Sometimes you can jump off and catch your thumb and produce a nasty cut. Do the same on the other side to leave our tenon in the middle. Nice and easy as we get to the tenon, because we don't want to cut into the tenon as this will weaken it. And the moment of truth, as we fit one piece into the other. Look at that. A perfect mortise and tenon joint completed.